Good day, this is Terry Difazio, and you're watching Dial It Up. Today, my guest is Ron Horton. Ron is running for the state senate from Orleans, Essex County. Is that correct, Ron?
That's correct.
And on the Democratic ticket. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
First of all, I met Ron at the 4th of July parade in Derby, and we had an interesting conversation. So tell us exactly why are you running for the state senate?
Well, you know, I was in Vermont in 72 to 83 with Delta Airlines. Mm-hmm. When we pulled out, I had to leave. When I came back 30 years ago, or 30 years after, I was happy as a clam to be here. However, looking around, I saw so many things that just had changed to the worse. Mm-hmm. For instance, our house we bought was on the market for 2 years. The lady had to give it up because she couldn't get the taxes. So she sold it to us for a good price. But then I started looking around. I said, she's not the only one. There are so many people that are hurting because of the tax money. And we're forcing all these longtime Vermonters to lose their houses and move out of the state. And that's just not right. So,
yeah, and you probably noticed that a lot of young people don't stick around either.
Oh, of course not. There's nothing here for them. Mm-hmm. We have to develop this area, so there is something.
Except maybe death and taxes.
Well, that's true. And rock and roll.
Yeah. So now you're other than Bobby Starr and John Rogers, is anybody else?
We only mention Horton on this show.
Okay. Other than them, is anybody else running in the primary with you?
No, I'm the one that forced the primary this year.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad because, as far as I'm concerned, you know, people need to get involved, and that's the problem with most of your politics now is people just don't get involved. Just like, oh, let them do it, and then they don't like the result. Well, that's their own fault.
Well, you know, I stole a mantra from the police chief, the new police chief down in Ferguson, Missouri.
Oh, okay.
He was a black man growing up in South Florida. I grew up in South Florida. He was obviously on the other side of the tracks with the police because he was constantly harassed. The interviewer asked him, why, if you had that kind of bringing and that kind of experience in your youth, would you want to go into police? He says, well, my mother had a statement, and this is the one I stole. She said, you cannot clean the house if you're not in it.
Well,
and I think that applies to so many things in this world and life. So I said, sure, why not? Let's go after it. I've got plenty of great ideas, and I'm sure there's plenty of intelligent people in Montpelier that are not doing anything but the same old, same old. Mm-hmm. So if I can bring in some new ideas, change the course of the horse, let's do it.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, and it just seems that this area. It doesn't come up with any new, fresh ideas. As a matter of fact, most of what the development that's going on is going on up in Derby. Mm-hmm. They're doing a lot of things up there, whether you like it or not. They're doing a lot of things up there, and Newport doesn't seem to. Of course, the thing with the EB5, that wasn't very helpful either. That really hurt us quite a bit.
I think it hurt us. However, I think it hurt us maybe in a good way. You know, I liken Newport's situation right now to a garden. And we spoke about a garden earlier.
Yeah.
You have to weed a garden for the rest of the crops to come in and flourish.
Yes.
And I think that's what we did by taking down the Spates block, which was a dangerous group of buildings.
Yes,
they couldn't even let people in there.
Right.
So we took that out. Now we have a big hole in the ground. And okay, EB5 fell on its face for a while. I don't think it's dead, but I think it fell on its face for a while. But it opened it up to the opportunity to get new investors to come in. not just one investor, but new investors and U.S. investors, which I'm more prone to like than the EB-5 program, to develop that area. And I think we will get that developed.
I saw a letter to the editor in yesterday's Daily Express. I don't know if you saw it, but there was a woman that had a suggestion. She said, because if they don't do something within a certain time period, they can't do anything with it.
Right.
Or it's extremely more difficult to do anything with it. She said, build an amphitheater, have concerts on the common there, and have this there, and have performances, and put the farmers market there. I thought it was a great idea to do something with it anyways.
Yeah. Well, they've been talking about a park. I personally would like to see more of something that we can actually... the amphitheater thing would be great. You and I know that we're both musicians at one point in time, so that would be a great thing for us. But it only develops a weekend. It doesn't develop through the week. So I think we need some things that would actually bring people to Newport, like they do in Magog, which was Bill Stanger's original idea. He wanted to make Newport a new Magog, and I think that's still possible. Amphitheater, I'd love to see that go in any place.
I think her point was, if we do something with it temporarily, then we can develop it more later.
Right.
But the idea, I'd like the idea, just because you're doing something progressive.
Sure.
Instead of having just a hole in the ground.
Right.
Which, in my opinion, I don't know how you feel about this, but in my opinion, the hole in the ground was better than what was there.
Oh, it absolutely was.
When I was a counselor, a drug and alcohol counselor, some of my patients lived in that block, and they said you would not believe the rodents and the cockroaches that lived there.
That's what I've heard.
It was pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
But at any rate, one of your big platforms that you're running on is taxes.
Right.
And I notice here on your card, which by the way, is a great card. You did a good job with it. Roll back property taxes and freeze taxes for people over 65. Now, I'm over 65, so I'm all for that. But in my opinion, I don't mind paying taxes as long as I'm getting my money's worth. So how do you plan to roll back property taxes and freeze them for people over 65? What is your plan to do that? Well,
first of all, 2 years ago, we paid our bills. Why did we need to increase taxes as much as went up over the last 2 years? There are people in Westfield, for instance. Last year, their taxes went up $1,500. What did they get for that $1,500? Nothing.
I don't see anything new over there.
There is nothing new. So let's roll them back. Let's get back on the horse, for crying out loud. We've fallen off a horse a long time ago. Let's roll them back. People over 65, they're stuck in a situation where they've got a limited income. They can't afford these tax increases. Those are the people that we're forcing out of Vermont. We don't want to do that. So let's put the taxes back 2 years. I don't know what happened to the let's make it work attitude in Montpelier, but it seems like every time something comes up, the first thing they want to do is raise taxes, or they want to make cuts. I don't think you have to do either. I think you can do it with development of the area. For instance, we are the hardest state on businesses that there is. What is that about? I mean, why are we so afraid of bringing in business into this state? We could bring in some clean industry into here. I mean, IBM's been a great treat for us. Biotech down in Burlington just increased, threefold, I think it was, on the news last night in their size. If we bring this in, we will have places for people to work. We'll have extra taxes because we'll have new influx of population. We'll have kids in our schools. I think we're just looking at things the wrong way when we say we've got to raise taxes and we have to make cuts.
Yeah, and right here in North Country High School, the school system is seeing a decrease in its number of students for the past several years. It's gone, I think it was up close to 1,000 at one time. It might have been more, I'm not sure the exact numbers, and now it's down around 750, 800, something like that. The enrollment at North Country keeps going down.
The one good thing, though, this year I heard that their freshman class is the biggest freshman class they've had in quite a while.
Well, that is encouraging.
Yes, it is. Very,
very much encouraging. So one of the other things that you talked about here in your card was incentives for for creating new jobs. How would you do that?
Well, if we want a new business to come in here, for instance, well, there's two parts on this. There's big business and there's small business. Okay, let's talk about big business first. If we want a corporation to come in here, what we should do is we should offer them some kind of incentive to come in. Right now, there's no reason for them to come here. First of all, we don't have any transportation up here. That's another thing on my card. We're going to talk about that in a second.
We'll talk about that too, yeah.
There's going to be an airline created in Vermont. We need to increase our train service. on our bus service. A company will not relocate to an area if they don't have a way to move their people and their goods back and forth. We have to provide that for them. Okay, so we can provide that. That's not a problem. I'll show you how to do that. But what we can tell them is if you come to Vermont, you promise to train and hire locals for your positions. We will give you a tax break of, say, 25%, this is an example, 25% off your business taxes for the first 2 years. So you can get established here. And then for the next year, you go up to 50%, next year 75%, and at the 5th year, you'll be at 100% taxes. But you've got to keep hiring and training people for these positions. Now, we all know that most jobs in this country do not require a 4-year education. They can be trained on the job to do these positions. But companies use the 4-year degree to weed out people so they don't have so many applicants. That's ludicrous. We have to just hire the people here. There's kids that we can retain here if we have that opportunity for them. So we have a business that will now come in. Small businesses, they're our job creators. We all know that. They hire more people than any big business can. We have to do the same type of thing. We didn't have that tax money before they developed their company. So in the first 2 years, let's let them not pay business taxes. We didn't have it before. We don't need it now. Let's let them get established. Within the first 5 years, most small businesses go out of business. Why do they go out of business? Because of the cost of setting up. Taxes drive them out. So we'll let them have a free ride for the first 2 years. And then we will do an incremental increase on their taxes up to the 5th year. That will also include things like we need the insurance companies to give breaks to these new developing companies coming in. And if the insurance companies don't agree to a certain percentage decrease in their policies, they're going to have a fine that's going to be a little bit more than what they would offer the small companies. We have to make these companies work. And it just seems like we aren't in the business of creating jobs because we don't want to. We're so intent on getting the tax money immediately from these upstarts. We have to think differently.
I want to ask your opinion on something. In my opinion, I see it here in this area more than a lot of places. I see a core group of people. I won't call them a majority, but I won't call them a minority either. They don't want to see any progress at all. They were against the wind towers. They were against the solar panels. They were against A&C Bio. They were against anything that would develop the area. Do you see that same sort of thing in Montpelier or not? And like I said, this is just an opinion.
Yeah, it's a shared opinion, I'm sure. Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't want development. I think what you have to do is you educate people on the need for what you want. Not tell them this is what's going to be. Nobody wants to be told this is what's going to be. They want to be brought in on the process and say, hey, listen, this is the idea we have. This is what it's going to do for you and your community. What do you think? Put it back in their court. Let them respond. That's all they want to do. They want to be heard. These people that are against things, that's all they want. They want to be heard, and we should let them be heard instead of shutting the door on them.
You brought up a point about education, and this is something that I've always been big on education because I think if people want to go to college, they should be able to afford to go to college. And my stepdaughter works at Linden State, and she gave me an interesting statistic, and I'll read it here. Vermont is next to the last in the country in terms of helping students get into a state college. Vermont is the second highest in-state tuition. And I'll give you an example. When my son graduated from high school, it was 1998. He ended up moving out to Kansas, where his mom lived, and got residency. And he went to the University of Kansas for $4,000 a year.
Sure.
Okay. What would you do to make this process easier, or to somehow ease this burden? Because I know that UVM, for example, the in-state tuition is incredibly high. One of the highest in the country.
It's almost $15,000 from what I've seen lately, and that's not not acceptable. Now, I'm a huge Bernie supporter, and I think that his plan would have been great if we could have gotten it instituted. It looks like maybe part of it might be instituted, so we help some of the lower income people. It's a hard situation it's so complex to just put it out there right now. I mean, for instance, right now I believe that our state assistance for college is somewhere around 20%, whereas back in 1980 it was 50%. And that's what one of the acts that's in the House, I believe it's 242 in the House, is trying to bring it up to 50%. But that's all fine and dandy. They have Act 40, I believe it is. The act numbers are little.
They've got too many of them.
They do. It's an act in itself. But
Act 4, scene 1.
Right. But they throw these things out, and it's great. But how are you going to fund it? Well, I think personally, and we will get to it. The airline will create enough revenue for this state to fund everything from pre-K to through 12th, and then we probably will have residual that we can help with tuition costs for these colleges. I think that's my biggest plan for increasing the revenue that we can give to colleges. We all have to be frugal, but I'm tired of hearing cuts because there's just so much you can cut. It's they want to consolidate schools. They want to do this, but let's go to the core problem first. We need to educate our kids.
Yeah.
So let's find out how to do that. Let's not worry about the money. The money will come if we put our heads together and really get serious about this.
When you brought up something else earlier, too, about on-the-job training. I worked in a machine shop in Springfield, Vermont from 1974 to 1998, and I was trained on the job. It's unfortunate, but those kind of jobs are leaving or have left thanks to several major corporations deciding that they would rather I don't know what you'd call it. Well, they call them corporate raiders. They basically buy a company, then they liquidate it. They just keep sucking all the money out of it, then they liquidate it. And but what you're proposing would work if you had manufacturing jobs here. And is there any way you can think of to attract manufacturing jobs?
Well, I think that's the same thing. As long as it's not going to hurt our environment. We don't want. Okay, the big argument on the wind towers is that it's destroying our landscape. I agree with that. It is destroying our landscape. We don't want a company that's going to come in here with smokestacks that are going to pollute our air.
Exactly.
We don't want a company that's going to be throwing stuff into the lake, which it's another subject of mine that I think is just ludicrous. I don't think we should ever pour anything into that lake that doesn't belong in there. So, yes, I think the same plan would entice these manufacturing companies to come in here if we told them that, listen, we're going to give you a tax break for the first 2 years, but you have to promise to do on-the-job training. The ANC Bio, for instance, they wanted to bring in a lot of people. Why? If we ever get that started, which I hope we do, I hope somebody will come in and fund that, why not bring kids out of high school and say, hey, listen, we can train you with all these white suit jobs. Yeah. There's not a reason in the world why we can't. The only thing I can see we need college educated people for are the people that have to do the formulas and calculus and physics and those type of things that do require some serious training. But to tell people this is how you make a computer chip, or this is how you work this machine that separates the different chemicals or agents that we're using in this facility, you can do that. So there's no reason to bring people in to this state to do that. We need to do the on-the-job training.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, for the first, I can't remember how many years it was, but up until 1987, the company I worked for was owned by Emhart Corporation, which decided they didn't want to be a corporation that sold out to the Goldman Financial Group. Big mistake there, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But while I was there, they would let you go to college, whether it had anything to do with your job or not. They wanted people that were smart, and they wanted people that would, could advance themselves and make the place better. After I got my education, and when I lost my job, I think it was in 2006, having a college education worked against me. You're overqualified. We don't want you. Oh no, and so it's sort of a double-edged sword here. There are certain jobs that do need college educated people, And the ANC bio people, what they could have done was brought in their supervisors and trained people.
Right, exactly.
They could have done it from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
They could have said, hey, we can train people. They, like I said, they did it in Springfield.
Yeah.
Because Fellows Corporation at one time employed 1,000 people. Jones and Lamson, I don't know how many they had in Bryant Grinder. As a matter of fact, we were on Hitler's bombing list. There was so much industry in Little Springfield, Vermont. We were like number 10.
Wow.
But I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. You have to you have to train people somehow. And if you're not willing to train your people from this area, then the area is just not. It's going to die.
Well, see, I think what I see a lot of the problem being when I started with Delta Airlines, the philosophy of Delta Airlines at that point in time was our greatest assets are our employees. Mm-hmm. And companies have gotten away from that.
Yeah,
their greatest asset is their bottom line.
Yeah,
which hurts the company entirely. So if we can get more companies like the one you were speaking of to bring these people, the supervisors, and train down, I think it's a great idea, and I know a lot of companies that have done this in the past, let their employees go to college or finance their kids to go to college, their employees to go to college, because it only helps the company in the long run. They don't have to go through new training to get new people in. They can keep these people in for a lifetime. They can pay them a retirement at the end of their 30 years. We have to turn this country around to that kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I would agree, because you go to a lot of places. When I went through periods of layoffs at Fellows Gear Shaper, I would work at other places, and they weren't offering a pension.
Right.
Because you had to vest people after 5 years, and they said, okay, we'll fix that. We just won't offer any pension at all.
Right.
And that was how they got rid of that. A couple other things I'm noticing here on your card that I wanted to ask you about was revised DMV regulations. What's that about?
This is my pet peeve.
Okay.
I grew up in Florida, right? And I went back there after I got out of the service and tried to stay there, and it had changed so much. But Florida used to have the most stringent DMV regulations in the country. They were all done through these state-run entities that were extremely corrupt. Finally, somebody got in there and said, these places are extremely corrupt. And so they brought this out in the open, and the public forced them out of business. So they went from being the most stringent to having nothing. Nobody died on the highways afterwards. The safety regulations that they said they were creating, they were bogus. Mm-hmm. Sure, there are things that a car needs to keep it safe, but window tinting on the side isn't one of them, or a fog light out isn't one of them. Mm-hmm. So our DMV here runs on a $27 million budget. Mm-hmm. It went up $1.6 million this last year. I don't know what they did with the $1.6 million. They say it's to fund the people that are working there. Well, the people were funded before, so they didn't need to increase it. So it's $27 million. They say what they're doing is they're recouping $300 million a year by having DMV there. Okay, so what does that mean? They're taking the money from the residents, and that's the $300 million that they're getting. Nothing's coming from out of state whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So how are they doing this? They're taking money from people that don't need a tie rod in, but the gas station decides that they need a tie rod in because the gas station can make a lot of money on that. Mm-hmm. And so they get that funding, and all this comes out of our pockets. Mm-hmm. I see an entirely different DMV. I see one that is state-run, but not like Florida's was. Yeah. I think we need to do away with all the inspection stations in the garages. Okay, that's something we don't need to put on them. First of all, they can make a profit on it that doesn't need to be made, but they also can be put out of business for missing one little minor thing. I know. The DMV can go to them and fine them right out of business, and that's
some of the regulations too. I remember when they plugged my car in. Mm-hmm. They said, and I said, well, you're having trouble finding something, but they were having trouble finding it. They said, this has to be done because this now goes to the state.
Right.
And if we don't do this, they talked about not just losing their business and fines, they talked about incarcerations.
Yeah.
Even.
Yeah. So, and they will go back 6 months, from what I understand. If they have a violation at a gas station, They will look at their records for 6 months. They will go to residents and say, I want to see your car. And personally, I would say, I'm sorry, you're not welcome here. But they can do that, and so it's a terrible situation. So we do away with all the DMV places. We need to inspect our vehicles when we buy it. Okay, when you first buy a vehicle, it gets inspected at this state-run inspection. And I'll explain those in just a second. It's a complicated process that I have. It's all on my website, ronhorton.info. But you go to there, they will inspect it. There's going to be 3 different lists. There's going to be a list that says these are the things that are safety related. You really have to get these fixed or your car will not pass our inspection today. There's going to be a list that says these are things that really should be fixed, but they're, you can fix them down the road a little bit, save up for it. You can fix them down the road. You're not going to get in a wreck for it. And there's going to be ones on a third list that says, this would be nice to fix. If you want your car pristine, this is what you should be doing. Okay. Now, these state-run facilities are going to be twofold. One, they're going to be enough for each county that they're located in, each with at least 4 bays. They're going to have 1 or 2 certified mechanics in there that will do the inspections, but they're also going to bring in apprentice mechanics to train them to get licenses down the road. These kids will come in, they'll get paid a stipend, under minimum wage, but their pay is really going to be their training. So they'll have these people in there training who can work on vehicles. Any service work done in the station will be on a per need scale. So for instance, if a person makes $20,000 or less a year, they'll pay for wholesale parts. They won't pay for labor. If they make $30,000, they may pay 10% for labor and wholesale parts. If they're up to $60,000, they'll pay for $30 labor and they'll pay for retail parts. So as a per need, they will be able to pay. This will bring in a tremendous amount of revenue for the state. Yet people can make their decisions. Adults can start making decisions like adults. If my car's unsafe, I'm not going to put my family in there. I'm not going to drive down the road in it. And they'll get it fixed. These facilities will also be open to the general public. If they want to come in and work on their own cars, they can do that at the same type of sliding scale for the rental of the bays. And I hope 50% of the bays would be available for this. We did this way back in the 70s in Vermont in a couple different places. Tire Warehouse was one of them. You could go in and you could pay a certain amount of money to work on your car. Worked great. So I think, if we develop this well, it can save Vermonters a ton of money. It can keep our roads still safe. DOT also, this is another part of it. DOT is supposed to be in charge of inspecting commercial vehicles. Well, they still need to inspect commercial vehicles. And they should inspect them every 2 years, not every 1 year, or every 50,000 miles. So it may end up as 1 year. But they need to start doing their job. Have you seen a weigh station that's been open in our state?
Very rarely.
Yeah.
Lately, it's been it used to be all the time. Now you don't see much anymore.
Right. So how much revenue are we losing by having those places closed? We need to open those up again. We can do that with the people that are being transferred out of the DMV that's currently in place and into the new one. It's a situation. There's one more part on this that I'd like to get to. 1 plate per car. 50% savings in our license plates. Half the cars running around here have only 1 plate because Quebec has that. Right? I said we inspect a car when we buy it. We also inspect the car if it's pulled over for a violation or if it's in an accident. Those are the only 3 times the car gets inspected. All right. We tax our people in another way when we buy a car. New cars still ought to be taxed at 6%. Used cars should be at 4%. People can't afford a new car. They can't afford the 6% tax either. They need to have a break on that. Seniors and students, less than that. I have that on the website too. My figures are a little bit off right now.
We're going to get to that. Our time is up, but I want everyone to know your website is ronhorton.info.
It is.
Okay, and we're going to post that right now. I want to tell you, it was great to have you on the show.
It was great to be here.
And I'm going to wish you the best in the primary.
That's August 9th.
And I'm going to get to that right now. This is Terry Difazio for Dial It Up. And I want to remind everybody that August 9th is primary day here in Vermont. And just remember this, if you don't vote, don't complain to me. Bye now.